After years of impatient waiting, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night finally released this week, and out of everyone I know, I was the most anxious to play it. If you couldn't tell from my hiatus-ridden Symphony of the Night LP, I like Metroidvania-style games. The ones where you run around in a semi-non-linear environment, searching for power-ups and gear to help you move forward. Castlevania, at least when they did that sort of thing, they don't really anymore, is my favorite in that department. Nowadays there are tons of indie games and such that dabble heavily in the genre, but not many carry the same flexibility and grace that Castlevania once did. You always had so many options to play, so many places to go, and although you were never told where you had to go, you never really got lost either. Though Castlevania is technically going strong in some sense thanks to the Netflix show, the game series has been left stagnant for a long while. Among the people dissatisfied with the series' treatment was someone who had a big hand in making the games, Koji Igarashi, or Iga as he's known to most people. This is what led to Bloodstained appearing on Kickstarter for the first time in 2015. Now, I won't go too far into the particulars, I didn't back the Kickstarter myself, and talking about backing a Kickstarter meant to revive a stagnant franchise will probably give some people PTSD. However, what is relevant is that the Kickstarter was extremely successful, making it one of the most funded video game crowdfunders on the site. This led to all of its goals being fulfilled, and a side game being released a year ago as one of said goals. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is said game. It's utterly non-canon, but it's a fun game in its own right and deserves its own video someday. Regardless, after betas and demos and no small amount of hype, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night released, and I picked it up right away at launch. So, has Iga fulfilled his promise to fans, or did he spend all the Kickstarter money on disposable wine glasses? Did he do both? Well, let's see. In classic fashion, Bloodstained begins with a narration by David Hayter, which introduces us to some of the concepts that will come up later in the story. In the 1700s, the Alchemy Guild was losing power and wealth due to the Industrial Revolution causing their benefactors to abandon spiritual and mystical guidance. Naturally, this led to the Guild attempting to scare them back by summoning armies of the dead upon the land. By forcibly infusing human beings with crystallized demonic essence, the Guild used them in a ritual as a catalyst to summon an abhorrent amount of monsters. These people, known as Shardbinders, were all killed by the ritual save two, a young man named Giebel and a girl named Miriam, though she only survived by being placed into an arcane coma right before she was taken into the ritual. I don't know why being asleep means anything about that, but I guess they just have to be awake before they die. Giebel and Miriam see each other as siblings, seeing as they grew up forced into the experiments together. It took them both to keep themselves sane. Although the demons were eventually slain by the church, many were lost, and Miriam would stay comatose for a whole decade. Upon awakening, she learns that Giebel has turned and somehow managed to summon an entire castle full of demons from hell itself. Determined to stop her friend from letting his power overtake him and others, she sets out to the castle with the help of a good alchemist named Johannes. For the sake of the game being recent, I won't go any further than that, though if you've played Symphony of the Night at any point, you will know exactly what will happen. Though even without that, the game doesn't play much attempt at a mystery. The story is pretty straightforward, and its small twists are pretty lacking, but that isn't really a problem for this kind of game, I feel. Character-wise, I think the game has a good enough roster, though not all of them are winners for sure. At the very least, the voice acting is actually pretty nice. Though, despite being voiced by David Hayter, I did find Zangetsu's character really out of place in a sense. He's said to be much more powerful than Miriam and almost wipes you out on a couple of occasions, but they don't really know what to do with him besides reference Curse of the Moon, seeing as that he was the protagonist of that game. Maybe I'll like him a lot more when his DLC comes out or something. Miriam, on the other hand, I actually liked quite a lot. The story isn't focused on her overcoming demonic powers threatening to kill her or her own sanity or something edgy like that, because she's already gone through that development with Giebel when they grew up. As such, what we have is a very confident and overall likable protagonist that's determined to fulfill her duty to her closest friend. She doesn't waste time worrying and is willing to help anyone in need, even if that someone is an annoying grandmother who doesn't know when to stop eating all my food. But yeah, the story overall is very standard, and although there are journal entries sprinkled throughout the castle, they're bare in content. Of course, I have no qualms about this at all, seeing as I don't hate this general story, then I'm totally fine with a basic setup in this kind of game, and again, I do like Miriam a lot, so speaking of the game itself, we should probably talk about the game part and less the story. As said previously, this is a Metroidvania, and in 2019 there are a lot more of those in the market than there were in 1997, so how much does Bloodstained do right in regard to its predecessors? Well, let's start with what Miriam can do. The game makes use of some common RPG elements, which gives the game a lot of variety in terms of equipment and, of course, weapon selection. Miriam can use boots, whips, swords, greatswords, maces, guns, katanas, etc., which all have their advantages and disadvantages, Guns can be great at a distance but require bullet management. Greatswords are extremely strong but also very slow. Weapons can also have certain techniques or quirks tied to them, besides just being a better sword in terms of stats than the one you're using. Sure, there's a better greatsword, but does it have the same charge swing as the one you currently have? Maybe not the biggest choice, but a lot of weapons are different in that sort of way. Another way they're different is elements, as some enemies are resistant to certain attacks, like armored enemies are more resistant to slash attacks. Not that it matters much, like in Symphony of the Night you really have too many options, so if you have a specific weapon preference, then it only takes a very slight change in strategy to make that preference the best it can possibly be. For example, my preference is a powerful sword that destroys anything in my way. As you might be seeing throughout all of this footage, I mostly use the greatsword. And the game gives you a bunch of methods circumventing the slow swing so that you can attack with your massive greatsword a bit faster and a bit stronger. This can be either through swapping gear, using specific buffs, or changing your shards. If you've ever played Castlevania Ori of Sorrow, the soul system in that game is identical to the shards in this game. Almost every enemy in the game has a unique shard they drop upon death, whereupon Miriam will painfully absorb it and gain a new ability to try out. Shards come in 5 flavors. Conjure, which allows you to conjure something in front of you, usually a projectile or a temporary summon. Manipulate allows you to manipulate yourself or things around you, aka a grabby hand for moving stuff, a transportation power-up, or a gradual heal. It usually drains your MP over time as you use them. Directional lets you aim with the right analog stick before firing, not much else to it, it's usually projectiles as well. Passive allows you to grant yourself a permanent buff or effect as long as you have it on. And finally, Familiars summons a familiar to assist you in the same way Symphony of the Night handled it. You can equip one of each type of shard at once, and while a good chunk of the shards are pretty useless, you'd be surprised by how many of them actually help you in different situations, so getting and trying as many as possible isn't a bad idea. There's a ridiculous amount of them to try, and you can go from firing lightning to summoning a slot machine to attack for you on the fly. Obviously, since I used greatswords a bit too much, I used a lot of the passive greatsword mastery shard, which buffs my attack and attack speed for greatswords, even more so if I raise this grade in rank. Shard grade can be increased if you have multiple of that shard on you to a max of 9. Shard rank can only be increased by our good friend Johannes. Johannes, along with his run being the worst animation in the game, allows you to make a metric ton of items and equipment by giving him materials. You can also make food, which gives you a permanent buff when eaten for the first time, alongside being able to desynthesize any items you don't want into materials you do want. Once you make something from the guy, that item will be purchasable from the shop too. He'll also upgrade your shards, or change them into completely different ones. Long story short, shards can make Miriam really powerful, but it suffers from similar faults that the Soul system had in the Sorrow games, mainly that getting the shards is very random. They're drops. Whether or not you get good shards to use might just be up to chance, unless you feel like checking what every enemy might have and grinding them, and even then, as I said, a bunch of them just suck. Boss shards are a guaranteed drop, which is good because a few of them are required to progress. It's too bad to get the best ending you actually do need a normal enemy drop right next to where you need to use it to explore further, which had me scratching my head for a good while because it's the only exception in the entire game. But yes, shards are a large part of the means by which you'll overcome obstacles in the castle. Enemies themselves aren't the worst thing in the world, they look cool, but they're easy to deal with. Bosses, though, can be surprisingly difficult. I don't know if I was going in under leveled, but some of these guys can do insane damage. Some of them, though, I just couldn't care about dealing with their mechanics because it seemed really clunky. I found the human-sized bosses to be the more entertaining ones because not only was it an actual test of my reaction time, I could also find alternate means of dealing with them thanks to the large variety of effects shards can have on bosses. So in terms of a massive set of options for offense and defense, the game has you covered, but what about the design of the castle itself? In terms of non-linearity, it's very serviceable. You can go to whole areas you're not supposed to earlier than you have to, which is nice. Backtracking isn't too bad either. When the game blocks you off to get a different power-up, it's not at the end of an area forcing a massive backtrack, but rather it's usually the beginning of a major area like Symphony of the Night, and you don't have to go back to old areas multiple times. The castle design is very set though. To my knowledge, you have to visit each major area at least once to beat the game, so you can't skip areas without, speedrunning. That's not to say there aren't tons of optional places to go to, because there absolutely are. Exploration in this game can lead to a whole bunch of great and occasionally terrifying discoveries. Like Symphony of the Night, a good thirst for checking every nook and cranny is essential in getting through the game smoothly, but you can also just skip all that and beat the game as quickly as possible, at your own risk of course. Completing NPC quests can get you some decent items, but the best finds absolutely comes from searching the castle. I won't spoil every secret, but a bunch of them really made me feel like this game was made with a lot of care. You have a good map that tracks where you've been and marks things like chests, save rooms, and the war points you can use to get around the castle faster. You can also place markers, which is great for making note of places you missed an item at. Miriam, though, can be a tad slow when moving around, which is more a problem in the horizontal beginning areas, and power-ups that make you go faster don't really come until the endgame. The only thing that ever actually annoyed me, though, when exploring the castle was just trying to get the best ending. I feel they went a little too obtuse this time. A few of Iga's Metrovanias have the problem of making the best ending require less raw exploration and more raw reading of a guide to figure out what to do, and I did have to read a guide because I got stuck for like an hour trying to find out how to progress. It's not as if this game is very subtle about its bad ending either, it's just straight up gives you a game over if you decide to do it. Gameplay is great, exploring is fun, and everything feels good, so where's the inevitable Kickstarter-funded rub? Well, there isn't one, sort of. Graphically, while the game can look off a few times, these moments are minor in comparison to how beautiful the game looks at a bunch of intervals. These people know how to do the lighting for the inside of a demon-infested castle from hell. The enemies don't look too bad either, and I love a lot of the designs. It feels very Castlevania. The soundtrack is great too. Not all of it's amazing, but it's definitely worth a spot in the ranks of the other Castlevania OSTs. The performance, is not perfect. A room full of more than just a few enemies will lag without a doubt, though keep in mind I'm referring to the PS4 version, the PC version probably has no lag. But if you want to talk about the one thing that hurted the game the most for me, was the patch situation that hit the game right at launch. The game launched on consoles in a very glitchy state. Not unplayably glitchy, but as I tried to clear the game, I encountered a lot of problems that honestly made me feel like I was playing a copy of Mario 64 in the creepypasta. The NPC that gave hunt quests had bugged eyes, sometimes my accessories would randomly de-equip, the train boss didn't drop its shard after I killed it, so I had to reload my save to get it. Then I got to the end game and a whole bunch of weird stuff happened in Overdrive. I couldn't equip the Bloodbringer Familiar as a sword at all, I would spawn in the middle of a room even though I was just trying to leave it, textures would glitch out, and I somehow managed to zip out of bounds while exploring and softlock the game doing this twice. The invert gravity ability was especially volatile, being the thing that preceded a whole bunch of nonsense that happened when I was playing the game, leading to me erring on the side of caution whenever I had to use it. I actually had to stop playing at that point because I was just getting annoyed. I wanted to finish the game in a better mindset, so I waited until they'd inevitably patched the game, probably the next day. So, I checked the Bloodstained Twitter for any news, and they did patch the game a day after launch. Unfortunately, the patch was soon discovered to make saves made before the update even more volatile, such as making key items needed to progress not spawn. As of now, the development team's only fix for this is to just not make a save pre-patch, or just not patch the game in the middle of a save. Essentially, I had two options: redo the game with the patch, or finish it with the bugs. I decided on the latter since I was close to finishing the game anyway, and while I found myself enjoying the game still, it was not as much as I was enjoying it before. After finishing the game, I patched it and started a new save to see what was fixed, and to give them credit, the patch did actually fix most of the bugs and added a number of quality of life changes. Only problem is, the PC version started like this, with the patch installed from the beginning, while the console versions didn't. So, yeah, if you aren't playing on PC, get that patch installed prompto. But, look, I know talking about it is going to date the video, the patch is out since after the game was released, but first impressions are a big thing. I had to wait a day for that patch to come out, so these bugs really did take a toll on my enjoyment late game especially. And that enjoyment means a lot, seeing as the game is going for 40 euros right now. Don't get me wrong, this is a great game without a single doubt. It might be lacking a bit in the originality department, but I think that was the point. A Castlevania game that can live up to the entries released by Iga is what people wanted, and I absolutely think this game does that. There is a slew of free DLC coming, adding a bunch more to the game, including more playable characters in various modes, such as a roguelike, so that may interest those who are thinking about making a purchase. However, if Shovel Knight is any indication of this kind of plan, we might be waiting a while for those updates to come. But when they're all here, I'll definitely make another video about them, probably going into more of the plot. I feel like I didn't waste my money. I will definitely be playing this game back to back a whole bunch, looking for every hidden thing possible. But if you're reluctant to pay that much for the console version especially, you should probably just wait for a sale or when all the DLC comes out. I've heard no problems whatsoever with the PC versions as of now, so that's definitely the better option. I think it's cheaper too. With that said, I wish Iga's team further success in the future, and better and bigger things to come for Bloodstained along with it. Thanks for watching, guys.